It's time for you to create your fate.
Hey guys, welcome to my channel. If we are new friends, I'm life coach Meg Ellis. And this channel is all about giving you the tools to create your absolute best life ever. And if you've noticed, this is not my recording studio. This is actually my home, my office. I live in Houston, Texas, and we've been hit with storm after storm. First, there was this crazy tornado and then this wild tropical storm. And then we actually had a hurricane. So all in the span of about 2 months. And unfortunately, my recording studio did not survive the chaos. So I've been recording the audio version of the show at home. Literally picture me in a closet with a microphone trying to manage 2 crazy dogs. Like, literally, it's been wild. So my new studio is just about ready. And while I've still been streaming the podcast audios on those platforms, I felt called to at least share the audio here with my episode. So while this might not be the best high-tech production over here for a few weeks, I thought it's actually more important to get you the content. So the last couple episodes have actually been really, really good. Some serious drops of knowledge. And I did not want you guys to miss out. So thanks for showing up for me on YouTube. I promise to keep showing up for you even through all this crazy weather. So if you see this video, just know that the audio is about to stream and that I will be back on video in the next couple of weeks. So thank you for being patient. Thank you for sticking around. And of course, I'll be leaving you with one last thing. Expect good things always.
Welcome back to Create Your Faith, the life coaching podcast designed to give you the tools to create your absolute best life ever. I'm your host, life coach Meg Ellis, and I've helped hundreds of people create beautiful and fulfilling lives by applying the law of attraction, the Enneagram, and many other mindset techniques. Today, we're talking about going through it. Like through it. Like you don't know where you're going, but where you've been just isn't cutting it anymore. And you're feeling a little lost with no direction. Sound familiar? Just know this, you're not alone. Did you know that life coaches actually go through this too? The other day, I was talking to one of my friends, Drew Ross, who happens to also be a life coach, and he is going through it, y'all. But we actually had this amazing Zoom meeting. It was a Zoom meeting that was scheduled because I actually wanted to ask him some questions in regard to this new project that I'm starting up in the fall. And what ended up happening was, of course, we got completely derailed from our initial conversation and ended up talking about what he's experiencing at the moment, all this confusion, this uncertainty, questioning everything. And we ended up having such an amazing divine chat from coach to coach that we decided to actually hit the record button halfway through and record it for you to listen to. And I know some people think that life coaches have it all together, but really we're just regular people with the same ups and downs as everyone else that occur in this thing we call a human experience. Drew is 28 and going through something that astrologists call a Saturn return. So in the simplest terms, a Saturn return is when the planet Saturn finds its way back to the same place it was when you were born. And it takes between 27 and 30 years for Saturn to travel through the zodiac. So that means everyone goes through a Saturn return at the end of their 20s, and then again in their 50s, and then again in their 80s. And each Saturn return approximately lasts about 3 years. And during your Saturn return, you're reflecting on the past to better inform you how to move forward into your future. It's during this time that you essentially face down your demons. You'll reflect on your path so far, assessing, hey, has this been worthwhile? Has it been good enough? All of these wrong turns and missed opportunities that you've endured throughout the years, they seem to all come to a head, which is why this is a common time for people to feel a little low, but not really sure why. It's typically a time to focus on all of the lessons, but not the past. Because Saturn is here to make you acknowledge and understand and process your negatives up until this point so they don't keep popping up in your future. Sounds a little scary, right? Well, it can be, which is why you have two life coaches here coming together to talk about navigating through difficult times in your life, whether it's a Saturn return or not. Drew actually asked me about my own Saturn return when I was 28. And it was funny because it made me look back to that time. I hadn't talked about that time in my life in a long time. I was actually freshly married and freaking out because I thought I had made the wrong decision and I didn't really know what to do about it. So tune in as I actually share some never before shared stories about my marriage ending and my own difficult times. So grab some takeaways from my 2020 hindsight vision, grab some takeaways from what Drew actually helps me with, and then see how you can apply the same exact advice that gets us through tough times in your own life. I'm your life coach, Meg Ellis, here to guide you to your best life ever. If you've been wondering if there's more to life out there for you, guess what? There is, and you're in the right place. Get out of your own head and out of your own way to create the life you know you deserve. It's time to create your fate.
So I have this person that found me. I'm in this group called the Serving Circle, and we meet on like Tuesday nights. And I put in there, like, I have a podcast and I'm looking to bring on guests to the platform. Well, weeks, and it might have been months after somebody had commented on that post and was like, I'd love to do it. I'm a clarity coach. Like, I can help you. I always screen people that come on my podcast because I want people that are really passionate about their work. I don't know how to describe it to you, but you just know when you click and connect with somebody. And I want to make sure I have that before they speak to the audience. And so we had an intro call and it was magic. And so I was like, yes, we need to schedule this immediately. We scheduled it like the next day. And so she came on my podcast. We did a 2-part series, which was great. And then we just stayed in touch and we really stayed connected. And it was a couple of Fridays ago, and I was just having, those days in entrepreneurship, and it was just a day. And there are times, especially in coaching, where I'm like, I don't even know if I like this work. And I've even heard about writers too that are like, oh my God, I cannot, like what I just wrote, I cannot believe, I'm not into it. And you have to step away from the work to sort of get back into it. And so I was having one of those entrepreneurial days where I was like, it was so doom and gloom, everything. I had forgotten why I'd gotten into the work.
Right.
She had messaged me. I was on a call. I always put my phone on airplane mode on these calls. And I got off the call and I had a message from her. And she was just like, hey, I'm just checking in. I was like, well, it's interesting that you're checking in because like I'm so down and out right now. And when I say down and out, it was just like I had a heavy sock at my chest. Like it was just one of those heavier days, which is all manageable and doable. And part of the process also, like nothing had gone wrong. Like I can fully expect this. And she was like, tell me what's going on. Obviously, she's so spiritual. She was like, no, this is why the universe prompted me to reach out to you. And I was like, yes. And I was like, just explain sort of what was going on. And I was like, I feel like I'm in this shift in this growth phase. And I feel like some of the things that used to interest me in the past are no longer serving me and no longer things that I really am into anymore. And that's people, places, things. I was like, I feel like I'm moving in a direction and I don't know where I'm going. And the way that I described it was I've been put in the desert and I have a car and I have a tank of gas, but I have no cell phone and I have a very warm, sunny day, like great weather, and I have a radio and I have no street signs, no Google Maps, and it's just like drive. And I feel like that's sort of what's going on. And so what I'm really enjoying right now is like the wind blowing through my hair and like the sound of the radio and the blue sky and the sunshine and my health and just like being me. But it's just like, I feel like I'm just driving and I don't know which direction I'm necessarily heading, but I know that I can put my foot on the gas.
Yeah.
And she was like, have you looked into Saturn Return? And I was like, what is that? And she was like, just look up the dates and let me know. So I went to this like Saturn Return calculator and pulled it up and I'm like in the thick of it. It's like, it goes until next year for me. It's like another year. And then I take 5 months off and then it goes another 5 months. And then I go through a window of years where it doesn't return. Mm-hmm. But when I Googled it and researched it, it was sort of everything that I just described. And this is new for me. So you might have more information on it.
Well, I've seen my astrologist for about 4 or 5 years now, and she's amazing. And she's the one who originally told me about the Saturn return. So basically, when you're 28, shit essentially hits the fan, right? And your whole life is like, what do I love, right? What is my why? What is my purpose? And a lot of people think that it's, oh, you're just approaching 30 and you're scared of 30, 30, 30. But no, it's actually the Saturn return. And I don't know like too much about what the planets are actually doing, but it's just this time in your life where everything just gets disrupted and you get into this phase of, I've always done things this way, but do I like it? Right? Is this really something that brings me joy, even though it already has? And it's kind of like similar to your, I'm in this car, it's a sunny day, I have a radio, but is this really what I like? Right? It's like, is there something more out there for me? Am I going in the right direction? And a lot of times you realize you actually are going in a direction, but you just don't have any speed, right? And because I don't have any speed, it kind of feels like I'm aimlessly kind of wandering about, but you actually are in a direction. You're always pointed in a direction.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing about Saturn return is I just saw my astrologist maybe even a couple weeks ago. And so you're 28, I'm 37. So basically, and I don't know, again, the exact angles and planets and placement and all that stuff. Something about like 9 years past the Saturn return, there's this like square angle, right? This 90-degree angle, which basically means 9 years later after your Saturn return, you essentially revisit all those things that you didn't take care of. So all these things are alive again at like 9 years after your Saturn return. So that's where I am. So we're kind of in the same place a little bit. Me, not so much as you, but I can totally relate to this. Like, you want to see it all and you want to have it all, but it's like, I don't know what I want, but all I know is what was good enough for me before isn't good enough for me anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're kind of talking about elevating into your highest self. What's that looked like for you?
Yeah. To me, as time, and actually when I was speaking with this woman, I was describing to her, I was like, there's something beautiful about, first of all, being 28 years old. I'm obsessed with that. Like having youth, like I think that is the like richest experience in the world.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Don't take it for granted.
Yes. And so I always just walk around, I'm like, wow, like I'm 28 years old living in Chicago. Like this is it. Like this is what it's all about. And I was talking to her, I was like, I feel like in your 20s, you feel things so heavily. Like emotions, it's like just your emotional radar is just peaking and like everything feels so strong, rejection in your first apartment and your first job. And then when you throw a business into it, it's like the emotions are just so heavy. And I saw an Instagram video and it was like, they were like, you're not going to really feel things as you get older in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, as strong as you did in your 20s. And I painted that perspective to her. And she was like, the thing is that I do feel all of the emotions that you're currently experiencing, not in the same way. But she was like, I'm a human being. So I have all of these like emotional signals. But something that I have now that I didn't have in my 20s was more certainty and more trust in the process. And she was like, that's the difference is now that I'm in my 60s, I've seen so much of life and I've had more of those, like, I guess, scenarios where everything does work out. And although I don't know where I'm going, I actually end up getting to where I was trying to go. Even if didn't look exactly like I wanted it to, it still ended up being a beautiful experience. So she was like, I feel like those emotions are coming on stronger because there's not as much certainty and trust in the process. And I was like, wow, that's a really great perspective. So to go back to your original question, I don't know if I can necessarily answer these are the things that I want because I know that I want to grow the business and I know that I want to help people through life coaching. I'm telling you, I don't know. And then here I go listing out what I know.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. and I know I want to be like in a relationship, right? And I want to be healthy. Like these are the things like I really want to fall in love with my business. I really want to fall in love with a human being outside of me because I've fallen in love with myself so much. But I am also, there's an element of it that's like ambiguous. And so the knowing part of all of this is stronger in the sense. So I'm telling you, I don't know because I want it to be like I'm leaning into the uncertainty and I don't want to be like, I need to be here at 33 and here at 36, house at 38, kids at 40. But I keep running into things and I have a much faster knowledge on, yes, I know this is for me. And no, I know that this isn't for me. And as time has gone on, that has helped me come up with some of the things that I do want in the future, if that answers your question.
No, it definitely does. If you think about it, right? Think about two signs, right? Yes, I want this. No, I don't want this.
Hmm.
So you're saying every time you say no to something, that is literally pointing you in a different direction, right? Sometimes direction is, I don't know where it's pointing to, but I know where it's pointing from. It's still a direction. So when people say, I feel like I don't have any direction in life, no, you do. It's just, it's a little bit, like you said, ambiguous right now and it's fluid, and that's okay, but it's
Hmm.
still a direction,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't
Yep.
have to be, exact coordinates of where
Yeah.
you're heading.
She brought up a great analogy for this, and this happened to me a couple days ago. But I was meeting my friend to get coffee, and the place that we normally go to abruptly shut down in Chicago. And we were like, okay, we got to go somewhere else. And we meet weekly for coffee. And so we went to this new place, and I was like, I was going to go to the gym and I was going to go meet him. And there were many ways to get there. Like, there's the way it was located. There's so many streets in Chicago. It gave me like all these options. And I knew the direction I needed to go. Like, I knew, I was like, okay, it's on this street. I know I need to get there. And I had my GPS plugged in just to like look down and like reference it. But every time I wouldn't follow the GPS, or it would be like turn right and I'd go straight, it would just reroute to the me going straight and taking the next street. And
Right.
so that is, I think, the trust and the assuredness is like, it doesn't really matter which direction I go. My GPS is going to recalibrate for me to help guide me and stuff. So even if it gives me a sign, it's be like, do this, right? Or we're, handing you this to get you closer to this. And I, for whatever reason, pass up on it or don't take that action. It's just going to hand me something else. It's going to keep me on that right track,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Yeah.
No, I totally believe that too. And essentially it comes down to what's for you will find you,
Hmm.
right? I'm a big subscriber to perfect timing. So if you believe in perfect timing, then literally all of your problems are solved. So it's like, if I subscribe to this belief that I do believe in perfect timing, then it alleviates a lot of worry. So what's for you will find you. I'm a big firm believer in that. So whether it's this way on the GPS or this road, what's
Yeah.
for you will find you. And if you subscribe to the belief that everything happens in perfect timing, then it alleviates a lot of your problems and a lot
Hmm.
of your worries. Like, so
Yeah.
ask yourself, do you believe in perfect timing? Yes or no?
I do. I mean, that's just, and I look back to, that's why the belief is so strong, is because I look back when I was in lower school and I like had a lot of girlfriends, but I was like, I like didn't have a best friend. And then in fourth grade, I met my best friend like right before going into middle school and stuff. And then when I started to, it was like senior year and it was like March of my senior year. I was about to graduate. My parents were like, where are you going to college? Like, where are you going to school? And I was like, my college advisor just told me about this school called Auburn. And they were like, okay, we're going to go tour it. And then you're going to go on spring break. And then you need to figure out where you're going to. So you have to make a decision. Went on the college tour, loved the campus. And I was like, I'll make a decision when I get back. In the Dominican Republic, the Auburn football team was on the trip. And then there was a whole other high school on that trip in the DR, like separate from our school. They were from Atlanta. We were from North Carolina. And they were like, we're all going to Auburn. Auburn. Like everyone that I met, they're like Auburn University, Auburn University. And I was like, oh my God. And then like even the way I found coaching, like just the string of things that have happened, like it all happens when it's supposed to. Maybe sometimes it's a little bit late. Sometimes it can be earlier than expected, but it
Well,
always comes.
what is late? Late to whom?
Exactly. There is no such thing. That's such a good point. And it's like when I met Auburn University, that's exactly when I was supposed to meet it. And it was right on time. Like it was all perfect. It was all great timing. You're totally right. Like that whole narrative of this came later than expected. When I say late, it's because some of my friends had committed to universities before, like in the fall of senior year. Right. And so all I'm doing there is just comparing my experience to their experience.
Yeah.
And I just watched, it's funny we're saying this because I just watched an Instagram video. Now my algorithm is serving me everything. And I don't just subscribe. I don't subscribe to everything I see on Instagram because it's just some of the stuff it lands or it doesn't.
Yeah.
But she was talking about how like New York, New York is 3 hours ahead of LA, but that doesn't mean LA is late or slow. That's just like the time zone that LA is on. And they were painting a lot of different examples like that. I'm like, that's so true. I don't frown upon LA or like I love Chicago to death. We're an hour behind New York. That doesn't make Chicago any less than New York.
Right. It's just different. Just
Yeah.
different. But a lot of times people think different is bad. So they assume that different is going to be scary
Hmm.
and then take on the uncertainty of something that is different. Right. So
Hmm.
now it's scary and uncertain. Right. And then now I don't know what bad thing is coming my way. So just, I'm basically expecting, I'm putting up this little wall, like protecting myself. Right. And I'm just not allowing things to happen in my life. Right. That's
Yeah.
where I think we can kind of get strapped to control, right? Of like, let
Yeah.
me just try and like reach out and even though, or like, or not letting go of things, right? Controlling things and not letting go of things, like all these things on your Saturn return. It's like, okay, I'm elevating. I'm seeing what's not for me anymore. Once again, that is a direction. Hey, don't go that way, right?
Hmm.
Like all this on your GPS, all the streets that it didn't bring you down, that's still a direction, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you got to let go of all those things, right? That
Hmm.
aren't for you anymore. And it's okay. I think a lot of people also put a lot of pressure on yourself like, hey, I've realized this is not for me, but I haven't accepted it yet. So I'm not ready to do anything about it yet. It's like you're staying in this little like, is it for me? And it's okay to have that gap of realizing it's not for you, solidifying that, and then making a move because it's the making the move part that is the hard part. Because a lot of times it's changing the way you spend your time, changing the people who you spend your time with, right? It's cutting
Hmm.
relationships off. It's being alone, not lonely,
Hmm.
but it's being alone for a little
Hmm.
while. And I think
Yeah.
28 can be a really lonely year.
Hmm. Yeah. It's very fascinating. And like, that's why I'm so like thankful for these life coaching tools. Cause I mean, when I tell you, I am leaning into them like I never have before. But I wanted to ask you this. Do you remember your Saturn return? Like with the what I'm describing, are you, not to say your experience is the exact same, but are you like, oh yeah, I had a Saturn return and I remember
Oh,
what it
yeah.
was like?
Let me tell you what I was doing at 28. I was freshly married to someone who I didn't want to be married to.
What does that mean? What do you mean you like you knew walking down the aisle, you were like, this is not supposed to be someone I'm supposed to be with, or
Okay, so I also had a lot of undealt with trauma that I carried
Mhm.
around. So I'm not going to sit here and blame my ex-husband and be like, you're a terrible person. It's not like that. We both did things that were not, you know, we weren't serving our highest selves. We'll say that, you know.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
my highest self was very undiscovered at that point in time because there was a lot of things that I wasn't willing to let go of, including my trauma and my grief. I wasn't willing to let go of that and process that out because that was uncertain and scary, right? A lot of times your brain convinces you that misery is better than uncertainty. So even though I'm miserable in my traumatic and grief-ridden state, it's better because I don't know what's on the other side of this. I don't know what the letting go process is, whether it's grief, people, time, habits, whatever.
Yeah.
So we stay where we are. Now, what happened with me is I was getting caught up with the new shiny thing that could make me happy because I thought, oh, if I have enough, and I hate to sound so like crass when it comes to something as beautiful as marriage, because I do think it is a beautiful thing. I'm not married still, so I think that's where if anyone didn't know that, I was just looking for something to heal my pain. And it was just like this like fun relationship. Wow, a really great person. We traveled internationally a lot. It was great. We were moving to Houston, you know, all these things. And we had this big wedding in Napa. It was beautiful. And it was like this big shiny object that I thought could distract me from my journey, who I am, my purpose. And that will never be the answer, right? It just every time you go outside of yourself, whether it be a relationship or a venture in life, a decision, any decision that you make that takes you outside of who you are, that is the wrong direction, right?
Hmm.
Right? The direction is inward. So all the shiny kind of objects, the fun and exciting stuff wore off. It's like we moved to Houston and it was like 9 to 5, come home. And I also like, we didn't really know each other because we had a long distance relationship for a long time. And it was like, whoa, I rushed this just because everybody else was getting married.
Hmm.
And that's just kind of the thing that happens when you're 28. Like every other weekend is a bachelorette party and a bridal shower. And it's like, whoa, okay, I guess I'll hop on that bandwagon, right? This will make me happy. Great. And then when all that stuff kind of wore off, I turned 28, like a couple months afterwards. And I remember my first memory of being unhappily married. And actually, I don't think I've ever told the story. Not like, and I wasn't even miserable, but I remember meeting this guy at the gym who would later turn into my husband's best friend. Like we were like couple friends, you know, we hung out for 3 years. They haven't said a word to me since we got divorced. So anyway, I remember I taught fitness. I taught indoor cycling at LA Fitness, and I met this guy. He's cute. Like, hey, when you're married, you can acknowledge that people are attractive or not.
For sure.
And I just remember being like, oh yeah, he's really attractive. And I remember talking to him like strictly platonically, and he introduced his wife's name. And he said,
Mhm.
oh, me and my wife. And I just remember being really disappointed that he was married and
Mm.
sad. And I was just like, what is this telling me about me? Like, that's really weird, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. Like, why am I disappointed that you're married? You know? And then I was like, well, I'm married, you know? So that was the beginning of my Saturn return. And my Saturn return was wild. Let me tell you that. It was
Yeah.
filled with not making great decisions. We'll say that.
Yeah.
And eventually, you know, I ended up getting divorced and going through a healing journey much after I, you know, years later. But yeah, so I would say the direction, if you're looking for a direction, is always inward, right? And trust your
Yeah.
intuition and the way you feel. It's like, this doesn't really excite me anymore. That's not a bad thing, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
take away from all the excitement that it gave you for a long time.
Yeah. You just told a really good story. And I had one question originally. I was like, what new Saturn return things are coming up for you 9 years later? But like, what I think about is like the covering up that you were doing, like the new place in Houston, like with the man and the wedding and the trips and all these things. Like sometimes, and I'm interested to hear you think about this, but sometimes you don't know that you're covering up. Like sometimes that's actually, you don't actually know that that's what's going on. You just can just pile it on. And it kind of wears off, you're like, okay, well, I can add something else on top of it. So when did you start to realize that what it was actually, you were doing things that were covering something up that was much deeper on the inside? Like, how did you come to that realization?
Honestly, is when I discovered the Enneagram. I
Mhm.
realized I'm an Enneagram 7. I don't know if it was like the first thing I discovered, and this is years later, right? I had gotten divorced. I had a crazy, crazy rebound relationship. I still had this toxic attachment to an ex-boyfriend. And I would just like date this person, date this person. It was like chaotic, right? And it wasn't until years later I discovered the Enneagram, and it literally was like, you're a type 7. Your core desire, which is what it's based off of, core fear and core desire, and the super ego message, this fake message that your mind subscribes to. So your core fear as a 7 is like being trapped in pain. And I was like, oh my God, I've been trapped in pain because I've been doing this to myself because I haven't dealt with any of my grief. And my core desire is to be happy and fulfilled, which made sense because I was like chasing this, indoor cycling, this company, Soul Cycle. Like,
Mhm.
I tried this networking company, like this blew up in my face, like this. Like, again, same thing with my ex-husband, like shiny object. And all these things are outside of yourself. And it wasn't until I was like, oh, wow, I'm distracting myself and I'm not even giving myself time to be sad. Like, that's weird, right? Like, because my super ego message says like, hey, you're good, you're lovable, you have a lot of self-worth, everything's gonna be okay if you get what you need. So it's like I was trying to fill those gaps. And so that was a huge eye-opener for me. And I started looking into that more, and I'm like, oh God, I really do that. And so when you have the awareness is the first step, right? Again, that awareness, it doesn't always come with immediate change, right? So just know, like, you can give yourself grace to like, oh, I think I'm doing this. Okay, I'm ready to look inside, because I do think, I'm not going to call it rock bottom or even a rut, but you just get to this point where you're like, this isn't enough for me. And what I'm trying to do to patch these holes in my canoe is not covering up the fact that my canoe is like getting massive water in it. You know, it's
Mhm.
like I have to take a cold, hard look inside at me.
Yeah. Maybe it's like the canoe has holes, not repairable. Like swimming to a new boat, is that like It's
Right.
going to be wet, might be cold, a little bit messy. You're definitely going to be doing it solo dolo, but like maybe that's to get to the, you maybe you can't see the boat, but you're like, this
Right.
thing is
But
not
I'm
going
like,
to
oh,
work.
my friends are on this canoe. It's like a
Yeah.
party yacht at this point, you know? It's like, I don't
Yes.
want to do that, right? That
Yeah.
doesn't sound fun. And like, I think accepting the fact that no, it's not fun. And like you and I were talking about this before we hopped on, recording this, about finding your highest self, right? And why a lot of people don't do it, because it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. You have these realizations about yourself. It's like, oh, maybe I was the problem. Like Taylor Swift, like, oh my God, it's me. Hi. It's like, oh, maybe that was my fault. And that's okay. Guess what? It's okay. I'm a human. I'm allowed to make mistakes. Or I forgive myself, or I give myself grace for this. Or like, maybe that wasn't the best decision. And you take ownership of your actions. And something that I've really been on this kick, my other coach friend Lydia talks about this in this program that we run for business owners. And it's called it's the point of power, right? So if you have power, you're taking ownership and accountability for your actions, even if they're not the best choice that you could have made. You're taking responsibility. That's the other one. That's when you have power in your own life, right? But when
Mm-hmm.
you don't have power in your life is when you're blaming and when you're making excuses and when you're in denial of things. And it's like, okay, if I want to take power over my own life, I have to stop making excuses. So having a hard conversation with yourself. What am I making excuses for in my life right now? What am I denying? And if you don't know what you're denying, one of my favorite quotes that I cannot unhear is, overanalyzing is a form of denial. So whatever you are overanalyzing in your life right now, you probably are in denial about something. You have your answer, but it's not the one that you want. So let me overanalyze everything and just spin myself into this little crazy circle of like, well, this isn't working, and then they did this, and then they did this, and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's just kind of like this acceptance, like, I'm ready to take power. I'm ready to
Yeah.
take my power.
One of the things that made, I think, life like exponentially easier was like when I fly and, on an airplane, I have zero expectation that it's going to be a smooth ride. The moment we take off, I know it's going to be bumpy going through the clouds. When we get up into the cruising altitude, there are still moments where the wings are flapping. And don't like the descent, like going through the clouds is even bumpier, and then landing, like wild. And I thought about that with life. It's like just having that idea. Like, I think we love to have this expectation that we're going to embark on something new. And I think that something that causes so much pressure and friction is the idea that you're flying in an airplane and there shouldn't be turbulence. No, of course there should be turbulence. You're going 600 miles per hour in an aircraft in the sky.
But you're so right. Like, why are you expecting no turbulence? And why don't you think that you're going to be okay after the turbulence is over?
Yes.
Why don't you think that the turbulence is going to end?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And even after my most turbulent flights ever, like we're flying through like a tornado, and I'm like, we should not be up in the sky right now. I'm so grateful when I land. I'm not really afraid of planes, but I love the analogy of like, even when it's really turbulent, it's like I have a renewed lease on like, go you, So when I do the things that are super tough, like I'm finalizing my executive, like the final string of my executive coach certification. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a little bit trickier, more like trickier than I thought it was going to be. But I know like when the plane lands and I get the certificate, I'm going to be like, oh, I'm so glad that like, although it was difficult, like I feel like I'm a much better person because I went through it. And something else that you mentioned, like sort of attributing where blame is placed and not taking responsibility. I think two places that your outcome should never be attributed to are luck and others. Because I think if you're attributing like, oh my gosh, I was so lucky or this luck happened, like I think that's downplaying the actual result that you created. Like it's just self-limiting and being like, it's like not being able to receive a compliment almost. And then we all know about the like, well, if so-and-so, blah, 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 or, I did this because X, Y, and Z showed up in that way. Like I'm on this huge kick that luck is just never, and like, we're great. Like if someone says I got lucky, I'm not going to be like, you're lesser than, but I feel like there is so much power, first of all, in owning, not placing blame on others, but also just leaning into all of the good stuff that happens in your life and knowing that like, you created it. Like you
Right.
created all these things. And so I
I
wanted to
think
mention
I love that because you can say like lucky girl syndrome and all that stuff, but it's not luck. It's you created that luck,
that.
right? Because of how you vibrate law of attraction wise. And at least the message I subscribe to is law of attraction, where it's like, okay, I'm not lucky. Good things just happen to me. I
Mm-hmm.
attract good things. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
good person, right? I do good things with the good things I receive, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like karmic in a way, but good things happen to me,
Yeah.
right? And that's not to say nothing bad ever happens to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't ever experience plane turbulence. It's a lot different than good things happen to me. My plane always lands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. That's a really good way to say that.
Yeah, my plane always lands. And it's not subscribing to this fake news that nothing bad is ever going to happen to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a podcast episode coming out on the power of maybe, where
Mm-hmm.
it's like maybe is typically seen as this really like, oh, maybe like non-committal, powerless word, almost like maybe it'll work out. Like I have no
Yeah.
faith in it, right?
Yeah.
But it's like maybe, like, is this thing that is happening to you right now, is it really bad? Maybe. Is this thing that happened to you really good? Maybe. Like you have no idea. Like this thing that you think is really bad right now, and it's like your whole life is crashing down on you. It's like, is there a chance that maybe something good can come out of this? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people don't let go of what's not for them anymore because it's like, oh my God, this is going to be really bad. No, just embrace maybe. Like, hey, maybe something new will fill this void, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's going to be me or maybe another person for me or another hobby or business, outlet or whatever it is, opportunity, we'll call it. But it's like, maybe this is good.
Yeah.
And if you look back and you think back to a situation in your life where something really bad happened to you. And did anything good come out of it?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, like literally something like literally just popped into my head. I got in this like terrible car accident with my grandma, and it was like it just came out of nowhere. Like we're like, how did that just happen? She was in the hospital for like a couple of weeks, but she ended up years, months later, she ended up getting like an insurance payout from that accident because it literally almost killed her. But at the time, her home needed renovation, and so she was able to use those funds to create the space in the home where she ended up later passing away. And I looked at it when it was happening. I was like, this is a lie. It was like 3 days before Christmas. She's now in the hospital. And then years down the road, I was like, wow, it's interesting how that like lined up to happen like that.
Mm-hmm. Perfect timing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have any advice for anybody that's like going, like, it sounds like you're in the midst of that like Saturn return right now, but you also have really good advice when it comes to like, there's no direction and that's okay. And when there is no direction, there actually is direction. But what do you have for like that? Let's just say we can maybe make it a little bit broad, but someone's going through a Saturn return right now. I know that I am, but someone else, it feels like they're just going through a shift. Is there like an offering that you can give them that can help them maybe feel more assured in their steps that they're taking right now?
For sure. I actually just interviewed by this local magazine, and it talked about purpose. Like, how do you know what your purpose is?
Mm-hmm.
And I just went back to a time, and I want to say it was probably around the time I was 28, of thinking, it's so hard to know what your direction is and your purpose when things are not going right in your life or feeling right in your life. And they feel like that, especially when you're comparing yourself to this imaginary timeline, right? The word late and early don't actually exist. It's later than the time I was supposed to be there, earlier than this person getting engaged and married. There's always that you have to compare it to something, right? So realizing that this made up timeline is so ludicrous, right? And accepting that, right? Because now I can stop overanalyzing all these things that I should be doing, right? But a lot of times when things aren't working out for you, so you got to realize, why do I think things aren't working out for me, right? Take it inside. But then also realize, okay, when I'm looking around and there's a lot of things that aren't working out for me, it's easy for me to say what I'm a no for. I'm a no for this. I'm a no for this. I'm a no for this. Look at all these things around me that I'm a no for. And I feel kind of stuck in my no. A turnaround point for me was realizing I'm just focused on what I'm a no for, and therefore seeing what I'm a no for, and therefore attracting and living out things I'm a no for. So just simply switching, what am I a yes for? I'm a no for like, I don't want to go with my friends anymore to this club, blah, 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 oh, I can't believe they still do that. Oh, now they're still inviting me every Friday and now I have to say no, blah, 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 all these things. What are you yes for? And start making decisions based off of what I am a yes for. And even realizing and entertaining, and nothing's, this end all be all, you have to be a yes for this. It's, could I? Going back to our favorite word, maybe. I might be a yes for salsa dancing, right? Let me try it. And, oh wait, actually that was a no. But let me try something else, and not knowing and thinking like, oh man, I have no direction because I didn't like salsa. No, that is direction. You're going away from salsa, but you don't like it. That is still direction. And it's kind of just funneling down where you want to be, like based off of where you want to be. What are you a yes for?
I love that question a lot because I feel like when I go to a lot of networking events, right? It's like, I'm like, oh gosh, I got to go to the networking events. Like what? But I'm like, what the hell? Like I'm in downtown Chicago on the river walking. It's a beautiful night. These skyscraper buildings, this beautiful location. Like even if it's something that, and I could obviously change my thoughts about networking events and I have, they've become much more pleasant for me, but you can fall in love with more than just the salsa dancing class. Like the people that you meet or like the legs that give you the mobility to like make it happen. Like I feel like there are so many directions that you can go in. And speaking of direction, it's very funny how we got on this call to talk about something absolutely totally different than what we just ended up doing. We didn't even come here for a podcast episode. We're like, we have to do this. And I love the direction that it went though. Like we weren't even expecting that.
No, we certainly were not expecting to have such a divine conversation on a random Friday morning, but we simply allowed the energy to flow through us and guide us to exactly where we were meant to be. Just like life, right? Allowing things to happen in your life with this lens of curiosity instead of trying to force what you think is best or what was planned just because you like to feel like you're in control. So if you are navigating through a Saturn return or a difficult time in your life, spend some time with your biggest takeaways from today and see how you can apply these into your life and your situation. Ask yourself if you truly do believe in perfect timing, and then trust it. I hope you enjoyed this impromptu episode with my fellow life coach, Drew Ross. Be sure to check him out. All of the ways to connect with Drew are going to be listed in the show notes. And if you like this episode, of course, subscribe, follow the show. It helps the show grow. Send it to a friend who is navigating through their own difficult time. Maybe this will help them as well. Be sure to check out my brand new digital course, 21 Days to Positive Thoughts. Go from being consumed with negativity to actually thinking kind things about yourself in only 3 weeks. That's right. Head over to letscreateyourfate.com or check out the link in the notes to get 21 Days to Positive Thoughts now. And for a limited time, you can get the course for only $29 when you take my free masterclass, Manifesting 101. That's right, 2 courses for only $29. Download them today and start creating your best life ever. That's all I got for you today. But of course, if I could leave you with just one thing, it would be this. Expect good things always, and they will happen.